A frosty wind howled through the deserted alley, rattling a broken street lamp behind a row of shuttered shops. Officer James Smith, patrolling during the late hours of a bitter winter night, switched off his car engine to better hear his surroundings. Snowflakes drifted diagonally, illuminated by the single functioning lamppost. Visibility was abysmal. Every breath James exhaled curled into thin white clouds before fading into the darkness. He put on a thick coat and walked into the alley, boots crunching on frozen puddles. Just moments earlier, he had received a phone call from a concerned local resident who reported unusual whimpering echoing around the trash bins out back. The man on the line mentioned he'd thought it was a wounded cat at first, but the cries sounded too faint, like something smaller, possibly in grave danger. Trusting the caller's instincts, James decided to investigate. As he advanced deeper into the alley, he noticed a shabby cardboard box lying askew against a wall. A stray cat darted away, startled by his flashlight's beam. The flickering overhead bulb cast eerie Rockies on the graffiti-strewn bricks, making the entire place feel unnervingly silent. His boots slipped slightly on a patch of ice, forcing him to steady himself against a rusted dumpster. In the distance, a series of short, high-pitched whimpers tugged at his senses, so soft that he nearly mistook them for the howling wind. With his flashlight sweeping across the dim corners, James finally pinpointed the source of the cry. Huddled beside a plastic bin was a tiny trembling shape. Drawing closer, he saw that it was a puppy, its thin coat tangled and filthy, with ribs that protruded alarmingly beneath its fur. Beside the pup lay a discarded fast food wrapper and a shattered bottle, suggesting it had been rummaging for scraps, or abandoned among the detritus. James's heart clenched at the sight. The puppy shivered violently, too cold to move or make more than a muted whine. Without hesitation, he bent down, speaking in a soothing tone as he reached out carefully, worried the little creature might try to run. Yet the pup, likely too weak to react, made no attempt to flee. He cradled the trembling body in his arms and felt just how icy the poor thing was. The pup's half-closed eyes looked glassy, barely focusing on him. James took a moment to check for injuries, noticing a small scrape on the dog's flank and raw pads on its paws. James took off his police jacket. Although the wind bit sharply at his shoulders, he wrapped the puppy in the warm fabric. Almost at once, the trembling slowed, and a tiny whimper escaped the pup's throat, a pitiful sound that struck James harder than any call he'd answered that night. A nearby security light flickered to life, briefly illuminating the pup's filthy fur. The dog looked even more fragile under the sudden glare, making James swallow hard at the thought of how close it had come to freezing to death. Realizing that Rocky needed immediate medical attention, James raced through the nearly deserted streets to reach the only open veterinary clinic. His patrol car's headlights cut through the darkness, reflecting off patches of ice as he turned into the narrow parking lot. Once inside, the buzzing fluorescent lights in the emergency lobby did little to calm his frayed nerves. A bleary-eyed receptionist gave him a startled look when he rushed in, the small puppy wrapped in his jacket. Without waiting for formalities, James urgently explained Rocky's condition. The tired but determined veterinary technician at the front desk took one look at the limp, trembling pup and motioned for James to follow her into the treatment area. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear, an unsettling mix that reminded James of a hospital ER at full capacity. With his nerves on edge, James paced the narrow hallway, occasionally peering through the glass pane of the swinging door, trying to catch any glimpse of the frantic work being done. Minutes felt like hours as he listened to muffled voices and the clatter of medical instruments. He caught bits of the technician's words. Hypothermic, arrhythmia, might need IV fluids, check for internal injuries. Each snippet made his heart pound louder. After what felt like an eternity, the veterinarian finally emerged. Her white coat, splotched with iodine and other stains from a busy overnight shift, bore silent testimony to the constant flow of emergencies she'd attended. She approached James and said, "Rocky is severely malnourished and has a nasty wound on his rear leg. We've cleaned and bandaged it, but it appears infected. He's also hypothermic. We are giving him intravenous fluids to stabilize him." James exhaled, relief mingling with a fresh wave of concern. "He'll survive, right?" he asked, his voice catching slightly as he struggled to remain composed. Despite knowing he'd only met this puppy hours ago, the bond he felt was already powerful. As the night wore on, Rocky's condition stabilized, though he remained unconscious, wrapped in heated blankets. The vet cautiously approached James with a stack of documents. "Rocky will need extended rehabilitation," she explained. "He's facing a tough recovery. There's risk of permanent damage to his injured leg, and his malnutrition level is severe. We recommend specialized observation for the next several weeks." James's breath hitched. He was a dedicated police officer with unpredictable hours. His cramped apartment complex also had strict rules against pets. While part of him wanted to ignore those barriers, just to keep this brave little pup close, the reality of his obligations weighed heavily on him. He lingered by the exam table, gently running his fingertips over Rocky's ears. "Is there any way I could still help with his recovery from afar?" he asked softly, torn between wanting to do everything himself and knowing it might not be possible. The vet's eyes were kind. "You can support him medically and financially, but he'll need hands-on care. Someone who can be with him around the clock." Nodding glumly, James tried to form a plan. He needs to find a place that can take care of this dog. After searching for animal rehabilitation centers, James discovered a multi-purpose dog training center on the outskirts of the city, known for rehabilitating stray or injured dogs and training them to assist in various rescue operations. When the day came to transfer Rocky, James found himself torn between relief and heartbreak. Standing in the training center's reception area, the place abuzz with barks and excited tail wags, James held Rocky, still bandaged but a bit more alert, in his arms for what felt like the final time. The puppy blinked up at James with inquisitive eyes, as if sensing the upcoming change. James leaned in, pressing his forehead gently to Rocky's. "I promise you, this is for the best. You'll be healthy, strong, maybe even a hero someday." His throat tightened at those words. Leaving Rocky with the professional handlers, James forced a smile and walked away. 2 winters passed, but they were a blur of new missions and responsibilities. James had since joined a specialized search and rescue (SAR) unit, forging a partnership with a highly trained German shepherd named Duke. Their bond was forged in countless drills, rescue simulations, and real-world emergencies. Despite moving forward, James often recalled the fragile puppy he had once carried through a snowy alley. He found himself wondering if Rocky had managed to recover fully, or if the dog had gone on to lead the kind of purposeful life James had dreamed of for him. The alarm shrilled in the pre-dawn darkness, rousing James from a fitful sleep. A harried voice on the emergency line delivered grim news. A massive wildfire had broken out in a remote mountain range, rapidly devouring acres of forest. The scale of the blaze was alarming enough that multiple rescue teams were being dispatched from across the region, including James's Search and Rescue (SAR) unit. Within minutes, James had grabbed his gear, protective clothing, respirators, and a pack loaded with first aid essentials, and sped toward the rendezvous point. At the foot of the smoke-shrouded mountains, an operations base had been hastily thrown together. Tents dotted the clearing, some listing under the weight of extra equipment or supplies. Thick plumes of gray smoke rose on the horizon. James felt the sting of ash in the air as he parked and checked in with the field officer. Rows of vehicles, fire engines, ambulances, and SAR trucks lined the makeshift dirt road, all ready to push deeper into the danger zone. Inside the command tent, a cluster of radios crackled with frantic updates from spotters and firefighters at the front lines. James was handed updated assignments typed on water-resistant paper, each line detailing which sector of the wildfire his team would tackle. Duke, his German Shepherd partner, waited alertly by his side, ears flicking at every burst of static over the comms. "All teams, be advised," came a voice over the loudspeaker. "One of our dogs is injured, and we are sending another dog from Bravo Unit to deploy immediately." James was surprised when he mentioned a strange dog. He was part of Unit Bravo, and so was Duke. Typically, each handler worked with only one canine, so he wondered who would control this dog. Stepping outside the tent, James and Duke made their way to the field truck, where a handler from the coordination center was preparing to unload the newcomer. Around them, the base buzzed with hastily assembled firefighters, double-checking hoses and axes, while paramedics laid out stretchers, anticipating smoke inhalation victims. The air felt tense, brimming with both urgency and a cautious optimism that teamwork might subdue the raging inferno. As the handler led the dog forward, James immediately noticed the animal's sleek, muscular build and a golden brown coat glinting in the faint morning light. Something about the dog's stance and bright, intelligent eyes made James's pulse quicken. Could it be? Suddenly, the dog froze mid-step, as though recognizing an old friend. Its tail began to wag so hard it blurred into a mere flicker of motion. Without warning, the dog broke free from the handler's grip, bounding across the short distance that separated them. Duke, usually poised and ready to defend James if needed, tilted his head in confusion. This dog wasn't showing aggression, only unbridled excitement. James's heart hammered in his chest. In that breathless moment, he saw the golden brown fur and earnest gaze that reminded him so vividly of the puppy he had once found, trembling in a frozen alley. The dog leapt into James's arms, letting out a series of high-pitched whimpers that rang with clear recognition. As James reeled back a step, the word Rocky surged into his mind. It was Rocky. Time seemed to stand still, the chaos around them momentarily fading. James felt tears prick the corners of his eyes as he realized the frantic, shivering pup he had rescued 2 winters ago was now a strong, fully trained rescue dog. Rocky pressed his head against James's chest, tail still wagging uncontrollably. A wave of raw emotion washed over James, joy, relief, and an almost overwhelming gratitude for this miraculous turn of events. He dropped to one knee, forgetting the bustle of the camp for a moment, just holding Rocky and murmuring words of disbelief. "I can't believe it. Look at you. You're alive. You're thriving." Duke, still somewhat puzzled, approached and sniffed this exuberant newcomer. Rocky gave a friendly wag in return, his body quivering with excitement at the shared space of 2 canines, and the human who had once saved his life. Curious firefighters, command officers, and medics nearby paused in their tasks, observing the emotional reunion with a mixture of awe and confusion. One of James's teammates, a tall woman named River, gently clapped James on the shoulder. "You okay, man?" she asked. She'd never seen James so unguarded, so visibly shaken. James stood, clearing his throat and blinking back a surge of tears. "This is Rocky," he said softly, voice trembling with happiness. "He was the puppy I—" His words trailed off, but the bright smile on his face told the rest of the story. While onlookers exchanged smiles and a few knowing nods, James hugged Rocky once more, burying his fingers in the dog's thick fur. Warmth and comfort radiated from that reunion, a shared moment of hope in the midst of looming disaster. For an instant, the encroaching wildfire, the swirling smoke, and the urgent clamor of rescue operations faded into the background over Rockade. By the profound bond between a rescuer and the life he once saved. Whatever challenges lay ahead in the burning mountains, James felt a renewed sense of determination. With both Duke and Rocky by his side, 2 extraordinary dogs, He was ready to face the flames and save as many lives as they could. There was little time to celebrate. The wildfire threatened to trap a group of hikers reported missing. With thick smoke obscuring visibility, the SAR unit needed every resource. At the frontline briefing, James was given command of a small rescue team, while Rocky, thanks to his specialized training, would act as a search dog. Despite having an active partner in Duke, James was assigned Rocky temporarily due to the dog's immediate availability and advanced wilderness tracking. Leading the pack, Rocky moved with incredible agility across rocky trails. James felt a swell of pride and astonishment each time the dog expertly navigated obstacles or sniffed the wind, guiding the team forward. The flames painted the sky orange and black, devouring foliage that crackled under the immense heat. Smoke stung everyone's eyes. Rocky kept his nose low to the ground, occasionally lifting it to catch any scent drifting through the air. Without warning, he veered off the main trail, a clear signal he'd caught a human scent or fresh footprint. It was nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead, so the team formed a tight formation behind Rocky. James kept calling out to potential survivors. "Search and rescue team. Is anyone there?" No reply emerged from the roar of flames. Pressing deeper into the forest, Rocky paused at a split in the trail. After a swift sniff of the air, he bolted toward a narrow path concealed by overgrowth. The area had not been on any official map, which meant the hikers might have accidentally veered off their intended route. Over the next several days, rescue teams helped evacuate communities away from the fire. In one abandoned farmhouse, James discovered suspicious burn patterns on the ground, as if someone used chemicals to make it burn stronger. His instincts told him these fires were no accident. Discussing the findings with local rangers, James learned that an underground network of criminals aimed to claim valuable land by setting fires and forcing residents out. Once the land was declared a disaster area, the criminals would swoop in for illegal logging, eventually reaping the profits through timber and other resources. While sorting through documents and interviews, James came across a chilling detail. There are sheepdogs brought into the forest for training and to stand guard when rangers come. Dogs that were injured or not aggressive enough were abandoned. Maybe Rocky is one of those dogs. During another major push against the fire, James's team received an urgent distress call from a trapped group of forest rangers. They had built a hidden observation post deep in the wilderness to gather photographic evidence of illegal logging. The criminals, aware of the rangers' activities, had used the wildfire to trap them. With Rocky's nose leading the way, the SAR unit located the battered rangers, pinned down by fallen trees. Thankfully, the team pulled them out. The rangers managed to save key evidence on a flash drive, detailing the extensive logging operations. The criminals were burning large swaths of forest to destroy any traces of their illegal timber harvests. After debriefing, James meticulously compared timestamps, geographic coordinates, and routes of the criminals' logging convoys. It dawned on him that the alleyway where he'd first found Rocky was just outside the region under the criminals' exploitation. By surviving, Rocky had unintentionally become a living witness to the group's cruelty. A subsequent raid on a suspected warehouse turned up evidence of international wildlife trafficking. Exotic animal cages, smuggled pelts, and large caches of illegally harvested lumber. The scale of the operation far exceeded anyone's expectations. James and the local authorities realized they were dealing with a well-funded syndicate. At its helm, according to multiple testimonies, was a Rocky figure known only as the Invisibles. No one had ever seen him face to face, but his orders dictated everything from the illegal logging to the forced displacement of communities. Investigations revealed the Invisibles' blueprint: burn the forest so no one could track the expansion of illegal logging, then explore for precious metals hidden beneath. The deeper the crisis, the more profit he squeezed out of the region. During an interrogation, one of the captured criminals made a sinister remark. "Your dog. Rocky, right?" The Invisibles knows he's with you. Doesn't sit right that one of his old guard dogs is now working against him. The Invisibles hates betrayal. The message was clear. Rocky was a marked target. James felt a chill creep through him. He'd already almost lost the dog once. He refused to let it happen again. Determination replaced fear. If the Invisibles wanted to confront them, James would be ready. Working with local law enforcement, James's team concocted a sting operation. They deliberately leaked false intelligence that Rocky had discovered incriminating evidence hidden in a ranger station. If the Invisibles' henchmen came for the dog, it would confirm their suspicions and draw the criminals out of hiding. 3 of the Invisibles' top henchmen took the bait, slinking into the ranger station at midnight. Instead of seizing Rocky, they were met by a large group of officers and rangers waiting in the dark. Within minutes, all 3 were subdued and firearms confiscated. With fresh intel, James led a multi-agency operation into the heart of the forest. Overgrown roads and camouflage nets barely concealed a sprawling base camp where a helicopter was parked, ready for a quick getaway. The SAR unit, forest rangers, and special tactical teams surrounded the camp. The final confrontation was chaotic. Shots echoed among towering pines. Flames still licked at the edges of the forest, adding another layer of peril. James spotted a figure sprinting toward the helicopter pad, a tall man wearing a dark coat. It had to be the Invisibles. James sprinted after the fleeing criminal, Rocky at his side. Just as the Invisibles reached the helicopter, one of his armed guards whirled around, finger on the trigger. The muzzle flashed, and James saw the spark of gunfire aimed directly at him. In a split second, Rocky hurled himself in front of James, taking the bullet meant for his handler. Rocky collapsed with a pained yelp. Heart pounding, James fired his own weapon, disarming the guard. The Invisibles was tackled by other officers before he could make his escape. Dropping to his knees, James cradled Rocky's bleeding form, tears streaking his face. With the Invisibles captured, the priority became saving Rocky's life. A field veterinary unit, set up to care for search dogs and wildlife injuries, sprang into action. They administered rapid blood transfusions, pain medication, and prepped for immediate surgery right there in the forest clearing. James refused to leave Rocky's side until medics physically separated them to perform the operation. Agonizing minutes passed like hours as he paced outside the makeshift tent. At long last, a veterinarian emerged with a relieved smile. "The bullet didn't hit any major organs. He's stable for now," she announced. James almost collapsed in gratitude, tears mixing with soot on his cheeks. Outside, the uniformed officers confirmed that the Invisibles was in custody, along with many of his accomplices. Over the next few days, the entire operation was dismantled, logs confiscated, trafficking routes shut down. In the weeks that followed, the forest began its slow recovery, helped by firefighting teams and environmental organizations. The wounded were tended to, the missing reunited with their families, and the criminals faced prosecution under an extensive list of charges. Throughout it all, James stayed with Rocky, ensuring he received top-tier veterinary care. While recovering, the training center discussed with James that he could adopt Rocky. He then moved to a new place where he could take Rocky in. In time, James and Rocky became living legends. Locals who had once fled the wildfires recounted stories of a brave rescue dog leading them to safety, of a policeman who risked everything to stop a shadowy criminal empire. Newspapers hailed them as heroes, and the once abandoned puppy now stood proud, recognized for his bravery and unwavering loyalty. If you like this story, give me a like and comment to let us know if you would like to have such a smart dog.